Yes, Katie, we're going to call the meeting to order at 3:01. Can you please call the roll?
Mayor Kaufman, Councilmember Andrews,
Here.
Councilmember Bergen,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Coombs,
Present.
Councilmember Gardner,
Here.
Councilmember Hancock, Councilmember Horton,
Here.
Councilmember Jackson,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Medina,
Here.
Councilmember Wiles.
Here.
All right, so we do have a quorum. All right, so no mayor's update. Any issue updates? All right.
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, Councilmember Bergen.
And I don't know if it's at the right time, but I am pulling 5A from the agenda for study session.
All right, thank you. We'll
Thank
go
you.
ahead and pull that item. That was annotated on the agenda and I didn't notice it, so thank you. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Any objection to approving the consent calendar? All right, seeing none. Item 3A, consideration for a text amendment to the food truck standards and definition ordinance. Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm just going to set the stage for this of why I'm bringing the ordinance forward, and then I'll let Trevor, and I think Eric is here as well, to go through all of the provisions. First, I want to thank Councilmember Wiles for allowing me to bring this to the Policy Committee multiple times, so I appreciate that, to kind of go over this. The reason why I'm bringing this food truck ordinance forward is, first, I want to be very clear. I think it's very important to food trucks give individuals, entrepreneurs, an opportunity when they especially can't afford to be in a building, to give them an opportunity to be, to not only bring things to the community, but also to just be able to have their vision of what if this was their dream. I do feel like there has been some compliance issues in the year and a half that I have seen the food trucks, not all over the city, but specifically at Hampden and Chambers. There's been some business license issues. I know currently there was 16 to more food trucks within a certain section. And if you know that particular area, it's owned by different owners. So in that particular section, the owner of that area could approve the food trucks because we didn't have any kind of compliance in place for the food trucks. There were some additional questions about operation, just kind of having some collaboration and just making sure that everybody within the neighborhood can enjoy the food trucks, but also to be neighborly with the time that they're there and then with the noise. Seeing some of the waste and disposal that I saw, access to safety. I have been into that area, and I'm talking particularly the Hampden and Chambers one, in different hours. Saturdays, I've been there in the evenings, and just kind of getting in and out of the area can be very complicated at times because, as you know, there are stores there, there's a Dollar Tree, there's all kinds of other businesses there. So ensuring that everybody can assess those buildings and those businesses on top of just ensuring that they can go to the food trucks, I think is very important. I'm not trying to say eliminate it within a retail center, but I do think that the accommodation of maybe having 5 within the square foot, especially in areas that have multi-owners, and that area does particularly have multi-owners. This isn't like a Corner Star or a Arapahoe Crossing. This is multi-owners, so they can have the owner can decide how many can go there, and I just think that we need to look at the spacing in there just due to that. So just for me, the licensing, the seating, using the surrounding property, waste and disposal, hours, access and safety, and consistent enforcement, just to make sure they have their permits up, they're following the rules of what the city is mandated for them to do, to be in these particular retail centers. So that is why I'm bringing it forward. I'm just speaking, I think it has been an issue all over the city, but specifically it has been an issue for me in Ward 5. And I know that they're needed, especially in Councilmember Wiles' area, but in condensed and dense areas, I think we do need to make some type of allotment that can only put so many in there, and with accommodating and making sure that the businesses strive as well. So that is my overall thing. I'll set it up for Eric to go through the proposal and to address any questions from my end, but also from the city staff's position as well.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Lawson. Let me just pull this up here. Okay. Okay. So yeah, thank you again. That was a great intro. And we will try to keep this brief so we can get to the discussion as quickly as possible. But yeah, as Lawson said, this is to go over some of the issues we've seen with food truck operations and to present you with the proposed code that we have to try and address these immediate issues. So this presentation was put together with myself in planning, Trevor Vaughn with licensing, Josh King with code enforcement, and then Cindy Perry with business development. So these first few slides just really go over the existing standards we have in the UDO. For the sake of time, I'll just skip through these, but they are in there. I can always go back if you have any questions on what we currently say and permit. So to start off, I did want to briefly just go over some of the benefits we have with food trucks, but I want to be clear, these ordinances are not intended to discourage food truck operations as a whole. And we do recognize that there are benefits here. They do create placemaking and good foot traffic. They activate commercial areas. They do provide us good tax revenue. They are entrepreneurial support. They're good starter businesses for prospective restaurant owners. And they do generally attract positive activity in the places where they're operating, as long as they're operating reasonably and ideally within these new standards we're proposing. So getting into some of the issues and difficulties we've had. So in planning with reviewing food trucks, generally our code only speaks to the operation of food trucks. As a result, there's not a clear delineation between a temporary food truck and a truck that is operating within our required timeframes but aren't leaving the location which they operated overnight, effectively creating a permanent use. Code also doesn't specify where the food trucks can be stored. There's some supporting code that determines, where commercial trucks can be stored and that sort of thing, but nothing specific to food trucks. And then the definition itself is also fairly loose. Doesn't make it clear what is considered designed and equipped to serve food and beverages. And then finally, we've seen increasing interest in the development of food truck plazas. Those would be kind of a permanent use where trucks could come in and have a kitchen, have a bathroom area, have outdoor seating. Food truck plazas were discussed in the early PED meeting. It was decided to move that to a second ordinance later down the line. That's going to require a little more research, a little more outreach. We're proposing the current adjustments to the existing code as a way to address the immediate problems that we see, like Lawson brought up with the overcrowding. So yeah, that is from planning. I'll hand it over to Trevor next for licensing.
Thank you. And as far as what we deal with, and we share enforcement with code enforcement, kind of who gets there first, but we do have a person on our licensing staff that kind of is the subject matter expert in food trucks and goes around town and can quickly identify, often from memory, which trucks have licenses or not. What we've seen is we just have seen these locations where we end up with large congregations of food trucks like Chambers and Hampton. Some of the concerns around those is just how it looks on site. Using up the parking lot, taking available parking, kind of closing off access here in the lanes, and some complaints from community members in regards to the appearance of the lots. Also what we tend to see is food trucks remaining on site, so evidence that they're not returning regularly to the commissary. Unfortunately, the food code just says regularly. It doesn't specify what that means, but we know in some cases food trucks will remain on site for months at a time without leaving, and what that kind of translates to, and what we've heard from the health department, what we've seen is some of those things that are already violations, but more likely to occur in those situations where the food truck isn't leaving, so it's not properly dumping its wastewater, not going to the commissary to ensure compliance with the food codes and clean, clean materials and fresh food, and everything's working there. Here's a picture I took where you can see the food truck was dumping their wastewater towards, and flowing directly into the storm drain. Sorry, Marshall. And then we start seeing structures being built around these food trucks when they're sitting in place, so where they start to bring in permanent tables. We're seeing that at Chambers in Hampton, and have seen some really interesting things kind of develop around them, but not necessarily particularly appealing in appearance, and not necessarily legal either. But just another example of some of this where, you've got the frame that's just left there because they're not leaving at night. They start to build these structures. You get the tables out there, the tents, and in one case here, they actually brought in a bus to use as a dining room, which raises a number of concerns, and it's not really a food truck at that point. And so I'll hand it over to code enforcement. Sure. Just some more examples there. I'll just pass it on. Sorry.
There we go.
Again, Joshua King, manager at Neighbor Support, includes code enforcement. Some of the issues I just want to talk about, what code enforcement is seeing, along with what Trevor is saying, is the storage in residential areas. When they do remove those food trucks, they tend to store them in a residential zoned area with they're over 6,000 pounds. They have the signage on them. We get complaints about them. Neighbors just don't want to see it. So we're kind of asking for that commissary storage area to be in the code so it can kind of address some of that we're seeing. We're also seeing stuff that's blocking traffic while operating. You see that in the previous photo where the tables start coming out, the canopies start coming out, people start queuing in the lines. That becomes a safety issue as traffic's trying to get through to that store. We don't want anybody to get hit, so we're looking at some guidance on that also. And then again, just speaking on lack of clarity on the policy for outdoor seating options. That is one of our big concerns with code is ensuring everyone is safe while enjoying these food trucks. Business development.
Good evening, Cindy Perry, Business Development Manager with Planning and Business Development. So from a business development perspective, some of the issues might be a lack of awareness of the code requirements, and that could be either the operator or the property owners. And I will say most operators are really great partners, but when they're not, it can really impact the other brick and mortar that's within a center or nearby. It can also impact the aesthetics of the city, which we have seen. Regulations help with that and better equip staff to ensure that everybody's playing by the rules. And in terms of sales tax opportunity, we are collecting sales tax, but I think that if we have some stronger regulations around this, it will make it easier for us to track that. And of course, there's some concern with competition with brick and mortar. I think the restriction on the number of trucks within a center will support the existing brick and mortar. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. All right. So getting into the meat of this discussion, into the actual proposed language. So the next few slides will go over that language. All of that was provided to you in the draft ordinance as well. So the first section that we propose some changes to is the food truck definition. We would add, a food truck is a motorized wheeled vehicle or trailer that is licensed for use on public roadways, designed and equipped to serve food and beverages. And then the added part, but not to provide in-vehicle dining seating. And then also this definition does not include the selling of food or beverage products transported by way of and sold directly from passenger vehicles. So this would address, selling food or drinks out of the trunk of a car, the trunk operations that were mentioned, as well as, that mobile dining bus that was shown. That's a bit problematic from a fire life safety standpoint. Next, these are pretty small changes. One, to the hours of operation, saying food trucks must be attended at all times. This addresses any issues that we've occasionally had where code enforcement is not really able to rectify the situation, as there's no one managing the food truck at the time that they show up while the food truck is operating. And then the section on noise, we've added an updated code section. The current existing code references a piece of code that has since been repealed. We're just adjusting it so that it now references the existing city code about unnecessary noise and disturbing the peace. So a bit of code cleanup there. One of the bigger changes we have is adding a storage section. Basically requires that all food trucks must move to a storage location after their operations have ceased. That storage location needs to be on an approved parking surface, like all of our storage required operations, or all of our storage uses. Needs to screen signage, also a requirement of storage lots, and then cannot be located on the same lot as a residential primary use. These codes are intended to address, food trucks acting as an effectively permanent use, that accumulation of waste and wastewater that we see also from food trucks not moving, encouraging a return to a commissary, and then addressing storage in residential areas, which over a year period from April to April, we looked at all the code enforcement complaints we got. About a little less than half of them were from residential uses. All right, and then the last big piece of code, adding number and density limits to food trucks. So basically what this section of code would do was it would allow any property to have a food truck per 15,000 square feet of lot area, up to a maximum of 5 trucks per lot. We would also allow 1 truck for every property, even if they're below that 15,000 square feet. It is worth noting most commercial and industrial properties in Aurora, at least outside of original Aurora, are over that 15,000 square foot. Looking at examples, we don't think that's too onerous. And this would help address that mass gathering of food trucks, that has been brought up a couple times now, and all the impacts associated with that being excessive noise, waste generation, and then fire and drive lane obstructions as well. Okay, and then finally, the last bit for discussion. At the last PED meeting, council members brought up a desire to potentially move some food truck operations to be allowed to operate at 6 a.m. Currently, the code only allows 7 a.m. Start times. The 6 a.m. number was mostly brought up in relation to construction sites, but there was a mention of having them operate at 6 a.m. for food deserts as well. The PED committee asked us to bring up a couple different draft languages that are not in the current ordinance for discussion here. We can add them into the ordinance, either of these, if council would like. So those regulations, these are 2 separate options. Food trucks may operate starting at 6 a.m. on active construction sites or while legally parked in streets immediately adjacent to active construction sites. That option is very direct on addressing this earlier start time just for construction uses. The second option is food trucks may operate starting at 6 a.m. provided that in no circumstance may any food truck operate before 7 a.m. within 50 feet of any residential structure with a certificate of occupancy. That is all intended to be a more broad provision for the 6 a.m., addressing some of those other issues where we might want a 6 a.m. start time, like food deserts, which can change and aren't as readily tracked, while also creating a buffer from residential that is, actively being occupied, so that we're not creating too early of a disturbance for our residents. So, getting into the end here, we have 2 questions for council. 1, does council wish to incorporate text amendment options A or B as presented on that previous slide into the ordinance to amend the text for food truck use specific standards and the definition? And then secondly, does council wish to forward the ordinance to amend the text for the food truck use specific standards and definition, adjusted as needed based on today's discussion, to the next city council regular meeting? Thank you.
Councilor Lawson, do you want to comment before we start discussion?
I think just by the presentation and just the reasons why I brought it forth, I think I'm hoping that the council would at least look at implementing these particular amendments and adoption into the ordinance so we can get it implemented. I understand, again, and I want to say that I understand food trucks bring value, and I hope we're going to get the food truck park. I think that's going to be significant. But I do think that some of the things that I have seen, especially in the past year and a half to 2 years, especially at the location I'm speaking of and some other locations, that we do need to have some compliance. And I think the things that were set forth into this ordinance, I would hope that the council would approve those moving forward.
If I could ask staff a question. So what's the distance again between food trucks no more than, it's 15,000 square feet? I can't remember what the number, or 1,500 square feet, what was it?
15,000 square feet. And that's not distance between trucks, that's just, if you're looking at a lot, just pick a random lot, the number of food trucks that lot is allowed to have under this new ordinance would be based on 15,000 square foot intervals. So you have a 15,000 square foot lot, you can have one food truck. You have a 30,000 square foot lot, you could put 2 food trucks on there, up to a maximum of 5 food trucks.
Wouldn't the city be in violation of its own policy then? Because when we have Global Fest or Aurora Fest, when I look at the concentration of food trucks there, I think that is in excess of what we're stating here.
Yeah, so, and I apologize, I should have brought this up a while ago. None of this would override any provisions in a temporary use permit. So a temporary use permit, like for those events, would still allow those trucks to go over that number, based on the provisions of the temporary use permit.
Okay, further questions or comments? Councilmember Wiles.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Watts. I guess I forgot. It seems like we got to choose between option A and option B. So,
Yeah, or neither.
or neither.
Councilmember Wiles.
Okay, so a few things. We have talked about this a lot in PED, and I have a lot of reservations about this. My whole ward, most of it is a food desert. They do rely on food trucks. We have Food Truck Friday in my neighborhood. So does that mean that anytime we have a Food Truck Friday, the HOA or Metro District would have to apply for a special use permit? That could become financially challenging for homeowners areas where they're trying to bring in food trucks to fill the food deserts that we do have. I believe there's one coffee shop in my entire ward, so we have a lot of coffee trucks that are out on corners to service people on their way to and from work, so that concerns me. Also, I know that we got a list in our packet of all the different commissaries that are available in the city. One of them is on Buckley Air Force Base. They do not let people come into that one. Like, you can't just show up and try to use that commissary. The others had very limited availability for new clients. And so I just worry that we're putting a lot of regulations on these small businesses that are mostly minority owned. They're really trying to get their foot in the door and support their families and hopefully eventually be able to fill some of, well, if we had open, storefronts in Ward 2, like eventually fill some of those. I absolutely respect Councilmember Lawson's concerns for that particular corner, and I understand she's getting a lot of feedback from her area. I'm getting the exact opposite from Ward 2, which is we need these food trucks. Don't try to take them away. Don't make it so that they can't operate and function, because they serve a very real need for the ward. And so I worry about that. The 7 a.m. is concerning as well. I see them out as early as 5:30, either on construction or, again, serving coffee as we're driving into the city. It can take for me to get into the city from where I live. If I get stuck behind Buckley traffic, it could take me 45 minutes to go 3 miles. And so I really need that coffee from the food truck that parks on the corner. Otherwise, I'll be very angry. So I just have a lot of concerns that we're maybe making it really difficult for small businesses to operate within the city, and I struggle with that.
Okay, I see I have Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Bergen, Councilmember Gardner to speak, and Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, 4 points, starting with the storage, with having the trucks have to leave and go find somewhere to be legally parked. I'm just curious if the city has done an assessment of that to see how much space we have, if now our, residential streets or public streets are going to become crowded with food trucks that are parked there, and how that might lead to even more complaints. The one truck for 15,000 square feet, 15,000 square feet is pretty big. It's equivalent to 3.5 basketball courts or 6 average sized American homes. I just think that's way too big when we look at how food trucks operate. They're clustered together, and I'm curious if we even looked at, where the big lots used to be on Chambers and Hampton, I believe that's at Cross Street, how big that actual thing is, because there's, I think, like 12 or 15 trucks in there. I just think 15,000 square feet is a bit much. And then were food truck operators contacted or outreach to in creating this ordinance? Because I think that having their feedback on it would be really valuable. And then last thing, I do agree, if we move forward with the 6 a.m., I would like to just see 6 a.m. allowed overall. I don't think it should be tied to a construction site, because I do see coffee food trucks popping up all over the place. They're great. But if they just want to be in a parking lot or on the street and open up at 6 a.m., I don't think it should have to be connected to a construction site. So a couple questions and just feedback there.
Councilmember Bergen?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On the options, option B, that 50 feet, that's really small. So I would not be in favor of option B, just because it seems at 6 a.m. in the morning, that could be right by someone's home. So that was my only comment.
Councilmember Gardner?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm glad Councilmember Wiles brought up the Friday night food trucks in Ward 2. I've been before several times, and I would have a concern that they're going to have to apply for a temporary use permit every time. I'm not sure what that costs, but that to me seems excessive to make them have to do that. I also agree with Councilmember Jackson on limiting to 5 within 15,000 square feet. I believe in property rights, and if somebody owns a parking lot and they want to allow more than 5 in there, I think they should be allowed to. So I'm certainly open to some of the concerns Councilmember Lawson is trying to address, because I think there are some things we could address, but I think this goes too far and overregulates. And so I'm glad to hear that all of a sudden this council is concerned about overregulating business, because I try to be consistent on that.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. Was it me next? I just want to make sure we're not skipping anybody. Okay. So just a couple of questions that I had. One is around the street parking. So Councilmember Jackson mentioned a worry that if they have to leave, then they're all going to be parked on the residential streets. My concern is that I've definitely received complaints over the years from people who seem to be pretty transparently trying to harass their neighbor who happens to park their own food truck in their own driveway. And so I worry that if we say, yep, you can't park in any neighborhood, that we're opening up, like we're creating a situation where we're saying, yeah, you shouldn't be able to be a business owner that has your food truck on your own property. And we're kind of validating that behavior that I've seen that has been really troubling when I've received those complaints and those council requests. So I think there has to be some kind of ability to at least park in your own driveway without having to build screening and other things in place. And then to the point that was made by Councilmember Gardner and Councilmember Wiles, perhaps there can be some kind of a special event exemption, right? We, on this city grounds, have more food trucks than are permitted when we have Global Fest, when we have any of these other community events that we host. And I have heard concerns from businesses about the having to leave every day. So I wonder if we can find a middle ground between you don't really need to leave and you're dumping water illegally and those kind of things, and having to leave every single day. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's, once every 3 days, but trying to find something that serves as more of a middle ground versus that frequency of daily.
Let me ask a question, then go to Councilmember Hancock. And that is, isn't there a requirement from county public health entities that require the food trucks to drop their gray water off-site?
Mayor, that is correct. They are required in the food code to dispose of their gray water at the commissary. It is a requirement currently that food trucks have a commissary already. We know we've got a fair amount of non-compliance with that, where we don't see the food trucks returning to the commissary regularly.
So they're required under current law to leave.
Correct. Under current law to return to the commissary, and including dumping the gray water.
Very well. Mayor Pro Tem, and then I've got to get to Councilmember Hancock. Okay, I'm coming. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, and then Councilmember Lawson.
That requirement, Trevor, right now is not daily, it's regularly, which is vague, and I understand wanting to take out the vagueness, but daily might be a little overkill in that process.
Okay. Councilmember Hancock.
So, Mayor, thank you. Trevor, back to the point of cleanliness and disposing of gray water, I am concerned, and I'm all for business. I'm all for food trucks. I think they're great. But my concern is particularly with the one that I pass on Havana, the trucks aren't moving. I'm not convinced that they're disposing of their gray water. And until we don't want anyone to get sick as a result of eating contaminated food in an uncleanly environment in a food truck. So how are we going to monitor? And we're really on a fine line here. I don't want to be over regulatory in nature with how these food trucks operate, but we want to have the public feel safe that when they eat and purchase things from a food truck, that the environment is clean, that the water is clean, and that the preparation methods are clean. How are we going to regulate or ensure that? Not necessarily regulate, but ensure that.
Yeah, Councilmember, I think that was part of our intent with the code change, was to make that maybe more easier to enforce, because if they're required to leave each night, then we can see that where they've gone. If we look at, I think that'll be a challenge if we look at, say, it's not every night, but it's periodically, some more difficulty following up on when they've left or not. I do know that some of those trucks at Chambers and Hampton do leave periodically, and then they'll come back because they're just stored there. Sometimes they'll leave there, but we don't, it's kind of hard to track them all.
Councilmember Lawson.
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to...
I'm sorry. Councilmember Lawson, then Councilmember Bergen. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Hancock, did you have anything more?
No, Mayor, it was me. I can go after Councilmember Lawson.
Okay.
Mayor, I just want to kind of go back to the argument. I understand that Councilmember Wiles, she has a food desert, but I'm in the middle of an area where I'm looking at just the density. And there's multiple owners, and I understand it's about owners' rights, like Councilmember Gardner and Councilmember Jackson and all of them said. But when you have 16 within a certain property, which the big lots, that's the individual owner who is allowing the 16 in a specific area, that's a lot of food trucks within that area, even though the fire department had to go out there and do the spacing, and they're spaced out. But there has been even more. When you go up in there are certain situations. So I understand you want to have that, and that's Councilmember Wiles, and that's great. But It's very dense in that area, and I'm not saying get rid of the
don't see
food trucks.
Councilmember Horton.
What I'm saying is that maybe limit the amount of food trucks within a certain area, specifically in retail centers that are owner-occupied by multiple owners. So I'm not trying to, when people are saying here, oh, it's anti-business, no, I'm not. But we have a denser area. That area is very specific to different ownership. And those owners can decide how many food trucks. If we have every owner saying, hey, we can have 16, 16, 16, I mean, there's nothing going to be, it's just going to be, just full of food trucks without even people even able to go up to even to some of the other stores that are up in there, like the Dollar Tree and like all the bank. So that's what my concern is specifically.
Councilmember Horton, then Councilmember Bergen.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate the question around making exceptions for construction sites and other areas, considering I have family who work in construction. They start very early, especially in summer where it's the high construction season, and they're trying to get a lot of labor-intensive work done before the heat really rises during the day. And so for that particular question, one, I support including that as a provision, and two, I would ask that we move that start time to 5 a.m. Because of the working dynamics that exist within that particular industry. And then the second piece is and maybe this was my misreading of the documents earlier today when I was reviewing the packet. To your point, Councilmember Lawson, around the parameters for businesses that have multi-ownership. I don't remember seeing that, and maybe that was just an oversight on my part. But I think that that makes sense of having some regulations in an area where there's multiple owners and having some parameters around that. So that's my 2 cents.
Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I just want clarification. Trevor, you said that the disposal of the gray water and the return to the commissary is a requirement that they do that nightly, correct?
Not nightly, it's regularly under the food code. Yeah, unspecified, just says regularly.
And so this new code doesn't make that a change in that, to clarify it?
No, that's the state food code, state food regulations. This proposed code change says they shall leave the site nightly. So it encourages them to go to the commissary.
Right,
Yeah.
Which I actually agree with. I think just from a, health perspective, I think that's actually the right way to do it. So I have a question on, and I'm for option A because I do think the construction sites, that makes sense. Is there any way that we can do this and maybe sunset it so that we can see what the effects are? Because I certainly, hear Councilmember Lawson's concerns from her residents, from business owners, and I think it is a problem specifically in her area. So I don't know, is that a possibility to have a sunset on it and then reevaluate if it's working or if there's problems with it?
Well, Councilmember Bergen, that's an option that's always there, to have a sunset on any piece of legislation.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of it. I think again, I prefer option A with the construction sites. Oh, I know, I had one more question. Sorry, I wrote it down. What time do construction sites, what time are they allowed to even start construction? I thought it was 7 a.m. in the city.
So construction work can actually be any time of the day as long as they conform to the noise standard within that district or the adjoining district. The requirement from 7 to 9, they're allowed to operate at an industrial level, noise level. So that extends the amount of noise they can make, but theoretically they can do 24-hour operation as long as they stay under that noise threshold.
Okay, all right, so then the 5 a.m. would be fine in terms of not impacting that?
It's hard to tell. If they're using hand tools, they may. It just depends on who the affected party would be and what the noise they're producing, so.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so I was just looking as well for the kind of multi-owner property question in the ordinance. I do wonder if, rather than having the blanket 15,000 square feet, which feels pretty significant, if we could have a smaller density requirement and then have a specific application to multi-owner properties so that you can't have the situation that you're talking about. Because we've seen a number of different issues arise over time when there's multiple owners in an area that own adjacent parcels. So I wonder if there's some kind of an amendment we could look at for that. And then as well, in terms of density around the egress issues, like just making sure that the access and egress is maintained versus, again, a fixed density requirement. Like if there's some ways that you could have still a density requirement, I think some kind of density requirement makes sense, but instead of having it be such a large area, instead you specify the multi-owner issues and specify not impeding egress and access to other businesses.
Trevor, can I ask you a question on that? So I'm in agreement to that. I would accept that as something that we could work through. Am I kind of going out of turn to say that, and I'm looking at specifically at Ward 5, but other throughout the city. Are there other retail centers that have multi-owners? I'm just saying throughout the city.
Outside of Ward 5.
Besides, yeah, okay, yeah. Outside of Ward 5.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm getting,
Yes, they're multi across the entire city.
Okay.
From north down to south that have multi-commercial property owners within a.
Okay, I would be willing to, because to me, I think if that's kind of a friendly amendment to work through. I know that there's other concerns, but really, I'm looking at the centers that I'm looking at in Ward 5, because there's a lot of older ones, they're multi-owned. It's not like the Corner Star. It's not Arapahoe Crossing. It's not, Pioneer Hills. So these are ones like that. So I would be willing to accept that one. Is that something that we could do to maybe put into this, or would that complicate things?
We can look into it. It's hard to say if it'll be more or less complicated. We have a lot of those shopping centers, they have different ways that the lot is split. Some of them is just one lot with a bunch of different owners. Other ones, like I believe Chambers in Hampton, actually, each parking lot is actually split
Exactly.
for the individual
That's what I'm saying,
owners,
and
so
that's what I'm
it's
saying. The
tough.
density could become enormous if each owner decided to say, hey, I want to have this many food trucks. The whole thing would just be that. So that's really has been the concern for me at that area.
So if I
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro
I
Tem.
think maybe rather than having to dig into how are they split, just say across the board in multi-owner properties, there's this density requirement, and outside of those properties, there's a smaller density requirement or something like that, like one that allows more food trucks. But however you want to do it, but just
Yeah,
as an idea.
I'm happy to go back and brainstorm. So.
Yeah, Councilman Ross.
Can we look at the two options too for the start time? Because just to limit it just to construction sites, again, affects the majority of my ward and being able to, have access to food early in the morning on their way to work. So I know Councilmember Bergen didn't like 50 feet, but maybe there's another amount because there's a lot of empty land, for lack of a better term, out there where they just park on street corners. For example, Gun Club and Six, there's a few parked out to the side of Quick Trip. Well, they're not anywhere near houses. And so I don't want to, selfishly, I don't want to limit it so that we don't have access to coffee and food in the morning.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a compromise we could find in there as well.
Yeah. And just to clarify real quick, the existing code limits operations to start at 7 a.m. So if they're operating before then, technically they're out of compliance now. Happy to look at even earlier times. I don't think we really have a big concern with that either.
So Mayor, with there being questions, can I maybe pull this and allow this
Sure.
to be brought back to
Absolutely.
another study session just for review and with just some of the comments, and I can work with everyone to see
I think
what we
that's
can do to compromise.
Very good decision. I think one, let me just raise an issue that I think is important, and that's from a public health standpoint, so that we have county public health regulators who say they should empty their gray water out on a daily basis, right? At the end of their business day, at an approved facility, which is called a commissary. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, well, again, it's regularly. They don't say daily. They just say regularly. And yeah,
I don't know what that means.
It's a problem with the code. So what does that mean? It says at the commissary, and to help clarify in commissary, pretty much, a lot of the commercial kitchens qualify as commissaries. They don't necessarily, say they're commissary, but a lot of these food trucks partner with restaurants, and that's approved by the county as their commissary.
Okay.
So there are specific businesses that market as commissaries, but restaurants, a lot of these food trucks partner with restaurants for commissary.
Because I thought it was a daily requirement imposed by county health.
Just the code says regularly. That's all it says.
Okay. Further. Councilmember Bergen.
Just real quick, I know we're going to continue this, but just for clarification, I think I asked this at PED. Metro districts can set their own regulations as to food trucks, right? Like a commercial metro district. So Southlands has its own metro district.
They would need to still comply with what's written in code unless it's through a TUP. And they could make regulations that are more strict than code, but
yes,
not.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. That would still be okay.
Okay,
great.
Okay, well, is there further questions or comments? Because then we'll just move on with Councilmember Lawson withdrawing it to consider the comments that have been made today. Item number 3B, repealing sections of Chapter 94 of the City Code pertaining to offenses and miscellaneous provisions. City Manager?
I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Megan Platt, Manager for Public Safety with the City Attorney's Office, and Megan's going to give us an overview of the code update.
Good evening, everyone. Again, Megan Platt, Deputy City Attorney. So we worked with Mayor Pro Tem on some of these initial code updates as a result of the Camp Simons decision. Predominantly, this part of the cleanup is really to address the mandatory minimums that are no longer good law based on Camp Simons. Those include the retail theft provisions, motor vehicle theft, and the theft mandatory minimums in the code. We removed those. That's kind of the biggest piece of this. It is 23 pages, so I won't go through every single change that we made, but we also went through the code and sort of looked at violations that maybe we don't charge anymore that are outdated and sort of removed those violations with the intention to continue working with Mayor Pro Tem on the next phase of this, which will be the general penalty updates and what we want sort of the new structure to be, and then making sure that all of those classes of violations that remain have a penalty structure that's clarified based on sort of the state law equivalents. And one thing that came up during study session that I think was confusing for folks that I'll just touch on is we did remove a part of the camping section regarding that the general penalty provision applies. That's just a cleanup because the entire code has the general penalty provisions apply unless otherwise stated. That was put in there, previously just for clarification when it changed from kind of a civil penalty to more of a general penalty. But that doesn't change the ability for enforcement to be within the general penalty structure under 1-13.
Okay.
And
questions?
Questions?
Any questions? Seeing none, is there any objection?
Councilmember Bergen might be trying.
Oh, Councilmember Bergen.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Bergen.
I'm sorry. Going back and forth between my East scribe and this. The skateboard, so that's completely taken out of code? The skateboards?
Skateboarding, yes, that was completely taken out of code. It's just not something we really see ever enforced or charged regularly. We see a lot more problems, I think, from the APD side on, you know, the e-bikes and some of the new toys that kids kind of have, and skateboards, not so much an issue with enforcement.
Okay, so the e-bikes would still be able to have consequences?
Yeah, those provisions that we had drafted and worked on with you, council member, are still all the same. That doesn't apply to any of these cleanup items that we have in this ordinance.
Okay, so if a neighborhood, because I get these, if a neighborhood complains about skateboarding in parks after hours, then we don't do anything?
The way that this is written, there could be a different enforcement provision, like park hours. If they're there past a certain time frame, there could be trespass issues if they're violating park rules and regulations, but it wouldn't be specific to the use of the skateboard itself.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions or comments? Is there any objection to moving item number 3B forward? Seeing none, item number 3B will move forward. Thanks for the presentation. Item number 5A has been pulled from the agenda by the sponsor. Item number 5B, evaporative cooling, Councilmember Wiles and Councilmember Bergen.
So 5B, 5C, and 5D are the three items related to data centers. Council passed the resolution 2 weeks ago telling us to come back on these items, and so the first one we're going to have up is to talk about evaporative cooling. The resolution was specific to that, so I'm going to queue up Marshall and his team to walk us through this one in terms of what the ordinance lays out.
Yeah, so very briefly, and it's a pretty short ordinance section, what this does is just prohibit new evaporative cooling technologies or systems for HVAC in commercial, multifamily, and industrial spaces. We currently have the large water user guide that we've talked about quite a bit, that council was supportive of us putting in code a couple of years ago. That's still in the large water user guide criteria. Within that criteria, systems still can be built including evaporative cooling components. They're typically a hybrid system. What this would do is say no more evaporative cooling components to any HVAC in those three spaces for new construction in Aurora. So this has been implemented, very similar code in Las Vegas, Southern Nevada, fairly recently, but they've had decent success with it there. And so this would create even more water efficiencies and water savings associated with cooling in Aurora.
I think it does require more energy. Am I correct if you're using closed loop versus evaporative cooling? And I hope that General Assembly, would be great for them to say that they to clarify and reinforce that the ratepayer can't pay for what the data centers are using more energy by virtue of what we've mandated on them. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 5B forward? Seeing none, item number 5B will move forward. Item number 5C, text amendment to update the permitted use table regarding data centers.
So this is one. This is one where there are currently 5 zone districts where data centers are an allowed use, a use by right. There are 2 where they're conditional use. We'll go into more detail on this, but in reviewing the zone districts as it was led up to the conversation 2 weeks ago, the zone districts of the mixed use office and institutional, MUOI, is one of the allowed zone districts. And those very much are kind of in our neighborhoods. It's one of the zone districts that we use actually for schools. We currently don't have any data centers in there, nor interest in those sites. But we think that we would want to go ahead and remove this for future use for those data centers. So we're not seeing that interest in that. So we think this is one that's pretty straightforward in terms of those, just given their location. So I can pull up a map here real quick and just show you. There you go. This is in your packet. So you can kind of see there, these are the zone districts. You kind of see that light blue kind of there. If you're familiar with the different areas, you'll notice those are in and around a lot of our neighborhoods. That's kind of our thought, is that we want to go ahead and remove those for future data centers. So that's why we want to go ahead and do that. So that's the recommendation, and happen to answer any questions you may have on this one.
Any questions or comments?
It's a pretty straightforward ordinance update. We go to the use table, and we just change that block from MUOI and data centers from a permitted use to we remove it, and it's not an allowed use. So that's our proposed recommendation. So no questions, we'll move that one forward.
Any questions? Seeing none, are there any objection to moving 5C forward? Seeing none, 5C will move forward. 5D, data center standards discussion.
Okay, so to cue this one up, this is one where the resolution that was passed 2 weeks ago really kind of said to come back to you all to talk about evaporative cooling, and then setbacks, and then anything else that we think is appropriate for council to consider. So this is really to try and get to that broad, any other issues. So I'm going to ask Brandon Camerata, our manager of planning, to kind of walk us through kind of a current state of what our code, how we currently define that, how we walk that through, and then we're going to go through a couple different really quick informational. The ultimate goal here today is not to decide what the setbacks are or what the screening requirements would be or any of those things. It's really just to kind of give you some basic information, hear from you all. We really want to see what's the consensus on council for in 3 weeks when we come back to the September meeting. Hey, this is what we'd like to see. We'd like to see recommendations on setbacks. We'd like to see recommendations on whatever it is that you all have. So that's the goal for the discussion for the next 20 to 30 minutes for you all. So I'll turn it over to Brandon.
Good evening, good afternoon. Brandon Camerata with the Planning and Business Development Department. Thank you, Jason, for setting that up. There's a number of slides which you all have in your package, and so I'll try to work through them effectively. The first package of slides is really talking about thinking about distance. And so I'll foreshadow a little bit here. These are the distances. The second part of the presentation is going to be thinking about things that we can do on site that might effectively help us look at this issue. Let's see. So effectively, the regulations that are in place for data centers. So data centers have been in our community for a number of years, but they've changed what they look like now. And data centers have pretty much the same regulations that a lot of the pretty typical industrial developments might have. They don't have special regulations associated with them. So they would have landscape setbacks, building setbacks, certain buffers to other uses. So kind of the typical standards that a lot of other light industrial uses might have in the community. You can see our definition there. We created that definition not too long ago. The most recent change we did with data centers was really to adjust its parking so that it wasn't lumped in with another land use. And so when we did that, we got that definition, I believe, from a Virginia county, so one of the counties that was out there experiencing data centers at that time. It is considered an industrial use in Aurora. As we've talked about, it is also permitted in some mixed-use districts. We'll get to that. And there's certain things that we don't touch from a zoning code standpoint, such as power allocation and things that Excel may be more involved with. So here's the zone districts that they're permitted in, meaning they're used by right, versus conditional means it's a discretionary discussion. And so we'll kind of touch on each one of these zone districts a little bit, and hopefully they'll start to be thinking about the distance ideas here and how they might be applicable to these different types of zone districts. So the first one we already talked about just a moment ago, which is mixed-use, office, and institutional. And so anytime we have a zone district that says mixed use, it means it is also accommodating residential uses. And so we'll want to be thinking about that. So as we already kind of talked about, these districts are accommodating a lot of times schools. Sometimes they're accommodating things that like to situate themselves in a campus type setting, like schools, maybe business parks, things like that. But in almost all cases, they are surrounded by neighborhoods. And so that's something to be considering. That's what we discussed in the last suggestion. The airport district. And so the airport district, you can see the map is basically our light industrial zone district out east in the northeast part of the city. Really, this would be the zone district where we see a lot of the warehouse and distribution and things of that sort. It can and does abut to residential land uses. So as you look primarily to the west boundary of that, those are probably going to be mixed use or residential districts to the west side of that. And so again, it's not a mixed use district, so it does not permit residential uses. So accident potential zone is a kind of unique specific zone district. It is situated at the ends of the runways at Buckley Space Force Base. Those areas are defined for us more or less by the Space Force Base and the studies that they conduct. This is a district that accommodates a wide variety of things because those came into being after development already had occurred. And so in some areas there's some residences, in some areas there's light industrial uses and things of that sort. So relatively confined part of area. It's usually sparsely developed because the regulations did take effect and kind of limited development in those areas at the ends of runways. So I-1, I think of I-1 as being a lot like AD. So AD, as I discussed, was the light industrial area out east. I-1 would be the light industrial area that's more and close to town. And so as you can see, it's smaller parcels, finer grain development. It's older industrial areas, usually smaller industrial parcels. So again, it's not mixed use, doesn't permit residential, but could accommodate certainly data centers under our current regulations.
A lot of logistics centers along I-70.
Now, I-2 is less frequently observed in the city. It is our heavy, well, it's called our medium industrial district, but amongst our districts, it accommodates the most of what we allow, the most intense industrial uses we allow. When it talks about one of the heavy industrial uses it allows would be heavy manufacturing. We don't see that a whole lot these days, but it kind of has that construct of the impacts of a heavy manufacturing can extend beyond its boundaries, needing sound or dust or noise. Sound and noise. So that might be something to be thinking about as we think about land uses for data centers as well. All right, so now we're getting back into some mixed use districts. So MUR, try to catch up with my notes here. MUR is not too frequently, it's tended for kind of central, Southlands Mall area is an MUR area. It's intended for high intensity sort of mixed-use areas, commercial and multifamily, areas that are viewed by the city as being high-profile, important areas of the city that we want to be thoughtful with development activities in, and maybe take advantage of certain logistics that are associated with those areas, such as proximity to interchanges, things like that. I will say that the QTS sites are within this zone district. And certainly this zone district does accommodate residential uses. And more often than not, these zone districts are surrounded by other lower density residential uses as well. Then MUA. So MUA is a little bit of a unique district as well. It's kind of a transitional zone district. And so that could come into play as we're talking about data centers. And so as you can see, it's kind of in these areas, if you can view the AD zoning would be to the right of those areas, and then more traditional single-family residential to the left of those areas. So those are areas where, kind of on the transition of industrial areas, they do accommodate industrial uses by conditional use. The thought process being, you know, we didn't know where that magic line of when the industrial was going to stop and residential was going to want to take place and things of that sort. So it kind of allowed for some discretionary activities there on making that boundary for those items. So it does permit a range of residential uses, certainly, as a mixed-use district. So this is kind of going back to what I kind of discussed at the beginning of, right now, it's more or less standard design expectations for data centers, meaning some screening of mechanical equipment that you might see on the ground. Screening in that context is usually a wall or a fence, and its goal is visual screening. And so you might even say like a trash containment area is usually enclosed, right? And so that is an example of that. Or if you had some big air conditioning units or something that were visible from the street, those would be screened as well. Landscape buffers. So then we're talking about on-site stuff now, not necessarily the distance between uses. You know, those are typically, if we're having industrial uses against residential uses, there's an attempt to soften the transition there with some additional landscaping approaches. So now we're going to start thinking about the distance ideas. And so we can zoom in on this map. So there's a zoom in on each of these. But in general, the map on the left is residential. And it's kind of hard to see, but if you pick up the crosshatch, that would be the zone district itself. And then you have the varying levels of buffer. So if we wanted to think about a quarter-mile buffer, half-mile buffer, green, quarter mile's red, half mile's yellow, green would be a mile.
So whenever we start talking about setbacks and buffers, it's really, you have to make sure we're talking about from what to what. And so this is a model. We're just going to give you show you the impacts of taking residential as sort of the base, and then sort of, you know, setting some buffers out from there. I think as a practical matter, when you go to implement this, I think it's going to be easier to talk about that any proposed data center would have to be, you know, you would start with the parcel of the data center and then measure your buffer from that to whatever district you're trying to buffer from. So if we want to buffer from residentially zoned properties, we would say, you know, start with the parcel of the data center and say you have to buffer from the parcel of the data center to a residentially zoned district.
That's a clarifying question
Sure.
about that. So a lot of times when we're talking about buffering, the question gets asked, are we talking from property line to property line or door to door, structure to structure? Like, how are we defining that, and could we define it differently in a way that, for example, if we were saying from structure to structure, it might actually create more spaces that are yellow or green instead of red?
We could, and when you do structure to structure, you're obviously measuring from existing structures, right? And so particularly when we're talking about some of these areas like the AD zoning, these things are, they take longer. One of the other questions then would be, what is the piece in time that we're setting back from? Because often, particularly for these large industrial uses, they'll come through and get entitled on their property, and they may sit on that entitlement for 2 years while they're waiting for financing, while they're waiting for Excel to deliver power, while they're waiting for a variety of things. And so we just need to think that through. The point you make is well made, so it's something we need to think through. Janine.
Janine Rusted, Director of Planning and Business Development. Also, if it's structure to structure in Ward 2, where there's permitted, there's master plans, and there may even be site plans, but there might not be the actual houses in yet. That might not get to what the sponsors are looking for.
Understood, and that makes sense considering the area.
Councilmember Gardner.
Thanks, Mayor. Why did staff select a quarter mile as the minimum threshold? That is significantly further than the standard that's being put in place around most cities in the country.
We didn't select a quarter mile. We're just trying to show you on a map what that looks like. Again, the details that we're going to go into are going to be in 3 weeks. The quarter mile, any of the other, they're all illustrative only. All we're trying to do is, when we're putting up a huge map, it's difficult sometimes to show what a 250-foot buffer looks like, what a 500. We're just trying to show you, again, when we're talking broad swaths, how much are you're capturing. You're absolutely right. We have a slide in the future that's going to show different buffering areas, and you're right. Those are normally, I think you've got some that go up to, to a quarter mile, I think, some others that are in that 250 to 500. So again, part of this is just for the illustrative thing today to show you all, when you start getting up to, those larger numbers, you start taking out pretty significant swaths of land from possible development of the data center. And whether you want that or don't want that, we're just trying to show the impacts of those.
Okay, well, I maybe we can disagree on that, because to me, when you put up what option does council want, a quarter mile, half mile, or a mile, and then other at the bottom, there is a minimum threshold being set, so we can disagree about that, but that's fine. My other question is on the definition of a data center. Who created that definition, and did council approve that? Because council is the policy-making body in the city, not staff. So I'm just curious who decided on that policy. Was our official, that definition was the official policy of the city. Was that staff, or did council vote on that?
We took that as a UDO amendment, so council voted on that definition a few years back.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councilmember Wiles.
And I actually would agree with Councilmember Gardner. I think there's been comments earlier in the previous meeting about data centers and how there's some in, I believe it's Ward 4, and how, what's the big deal? They're in Ward 4 and there's been no issue, but I think it would be disingenuous not to clarify that there's a very different thing that's a data center that's in the back of a bank or the basement of a small business or even a large business versus one that is the size of 2 to 3 football fields in length. And so I think that is an important differentiator to say that there are different size and different types of data centers that may require different rules in terms of the zoning and the rules that we're looking at down the line. Because again, a data center could be the size of a closet. It could be the size of 5 football fields. They probably should not be treated the same.
Mayor, can I respond to that?
Councilmember Gardner.
Well, I appreciate the lecture. I'm aware of how data centers work, and I'm aware of the different sizes they can be. The point is that this is being presented as a one-size-fits-all. So, for example, in the current zoning map that's up, it's showing a quarter mile. It doesn't say a quarter mile if it's the size of a closet, or a quarter mile if it's the size of 5 football fields as you described it. It is showing it as a one-size-fits-all, and that is exactly the concern that I'm trying to raise.
I was agreeing with you, Councilmember Gardner.
Okay. Further questions or comments?
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember Bergen.
This is very confusing. I hate these kind of maps because I can never really decipher them. It's going to be more complicated per zone, right? So if you have industrial versus the airport district or the MU, what is it? The other one, APZ, whatever it is. Doesn't that matter also? Like if you just do a particular buffer setback for everything, I don't even know if that makes sense. It seems like it almost needs to really look at the various zones in relationship to residential, because some are not going to even be anywhere near residential ever, right?
It depends, right? I think context matters in all these things. So your point is well made that, again, context matters on all of these zone districts and where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, and I think when we say quarter mile, sorry, here goes my dog, quarter mile, half mile, eighth mile, whatever, can we use feet instead? Because a quarter mile isn't that like 1320?
It is. So yeah, we'll do that. And I think that's a good transition. Let's go ahead and go to some of the next slide that shows kind of some of the, these are again, just of looking at different comparisons. Again, the purpose of today is not to get to what these are, but just to give you all some context. And again, I think some of the other discussions we've had, again, when you look at some of these, you'll see some folks are making a difference between, Aurora, Illinois is looking at roof-mounted chillers, ground-mounted chillers. Somebody else is obviously Chesapeake's doing from zoning. They're doing a larger setback to existing residential structure. So there's a variety out there of the different kinds, but this is just trying to show you, again, a mix of what some of those things that we've been able to find. So we won't need to dwell on this too long, but just trying to show you that those are there. Keep going. All right, and Councilmember Gardner has his hand up.
May I have a question? I do think we need to dwell on it. Can we go back to the prior slide, please? Because again, the slide that is on the screen does not ask about anything shorter. It says other, but it doesn't ask about anything less than a quarter mile. And if you look at the chart that was provided by staff, and I don't know how these were selected because there's dozens of other municipalities that could be put on here. But if you look at the chart that was provided by staff, in only 3 cases were they a quarter mile or more. In every other case, and in some it was significantly less than a quarter mile. So I'm still not understanding why we didn't map out a shorter buffer than a quarter mile.
That's what we'll do in 3 weeks, sir.
And
So this is Councilmember Bergen.
Sorry, just also population matters. I mean, a lot of places are very densely populated where we've got, room out east. So does that need to be considered?
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Bergen.
Keep going here. The next point here. So let's go to the next one. I want to go to the UDO definition slide because this kind of came up, right? Because let's go back to that one. Previous, one more, back. Okay, so this kind of came up here. So I think somebody had brought it up. Do you all want to look at, again, so the point that was brought up, there's a difference between a data center that is an ancillary use of a larger building and then essentially a standalone data center. So if you want to, I think we could certainly look at some definitionals setting for that again, I think there's a difference between a 75 megawatt data center and a 10 megawatt data center that's ancillary to a hospital or to something else, right? So I think that's something that we certainly can do, but we want to make sure you all are okay with that. And then obviously that definition could also then look into as we talk about both the different zone districts, but also what the setback requirements would be for each of those different sizes. So is that something that you all would like us to explore? Are you all open to sort of looking at those definitions?
Yes.
Any comments from members on differentiation in scale or size? Councilmember Hancock.
I was going back to the question that he had mentioned before about the 500 feet. I want to make sure that that is not forgotten in this discussion so that we make sure that that's included.
Okay, so we're gonna probably have to walk through these in different questions that staff have for us. City Manager, is there a question on here about which set of buffers council wants to require? That
No, this again, I think I've heard loud and clear. We will come back. We want to kind of give you all an overview of just one, starting with what zone districts are they allowed, give you some familiarity with where they're at, give you some idea of what other jurisdictions are looking at, and then we will come back in 3 weeks with some look at that, and we'll walk you through in that granular level. But as we start to do that, this is a fundamental question here of, again, are we looking at sort of a difference between, large-scale data centers versus, sort of something, again, that's more in that ancillary use standpoint.
Okay, so just quickly, so you are clear and you have heard from the members that mentioned it that they expect examples smaller than a quarter mile to be brought back when you bring that back in 3 weeks. Great.
So just on the differentiation of the data centers that you're going to explore, I mean, are you going to look at the AI ones because they're traditionally different in terms of the power and just the whole dynamic of that? So is that going to be part of this?
So typically what you'll see is the way when you're talking about modern data centers, they're very much classified in that. No, they're classified in essentially the scale of them is classified in megawatts. So how many megawatts of power are they using? We don't get into the end user, the sort of AI versus consumer retail versus those things like that. That's very, very difficult to regulate. What we can do and sort of regulate off is, again, is how big is it? How much megawatt is it using? And then that's got to, I think, really speak to the scope and scale. And so I think we can go out and bring you all some kind of data around where we think those breakpoints might lie.
Okay, so any objection to coming back with definitions that include differentiation based on scale and size? All right, seeing none. Oh, yes, Councilmember Gardner, and then I'll hand it back to the mayor.
So how are those categories going to be determined, those two different categories? Because clearly there's dissatisfaction with the categories of setbacks that were selected. So I'm just curious how those are going to be established, what we're going to use in terms of the megawatt cutoff.
So if I may, Mayor, it sounds like it says at least two categories. So if I'm understanding correctly, City Manager Batchelor, that means you will, for example, have the very small scale, not modern type data centers, and then you could bring back more than one
We
power
can, yeah, that's
level?
one of the things we'll try and do is try and give you also some context in terms of some of the different development we're currently seeing or that's already underway in Aurora, just to make you all aware of, again, hey, when we're talking about this data center, it's a 50 megawatt data center, right? Phase 2 is another 50 watt mega data center. So I think that's the type of thing that we can do.
I was just going to say the industry itself has set different categories. They have the small, the largest right now is hyperscale. So I think they're pretty well set based on megawatt usage. So it's an industry standard. Maybe we could start with that.
Councilmember Bergen?
Yeah, I think Councilmember Wiles just said what I was going to say. So there's the hyperscale data centers. They're just always categorized by megawatts, not by size?
Yeah, because the size piece is difficult from a building envelope standpoint. You have some folks that are doing multi-story data centers. You have other folks that are doing one story. So, I mean, in terms of size, I think we found that, again, to the industry standard, typically they're referring to megawatt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further questions or comments? Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, you still have more things you're presenting.
Yeah, we're
So I will-
I'm sorry. So Brandon, why don't you go ahead and go to kind of the, I think, so with that.
But hold on, I object to the last one, and we never took does anyone object? So I object.
We're taking positions at this time, am I correct?
Well, this is
Councilmember Coombs asked.
So we were trying to see if folks want us to try and come up with the differentiations between sizes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had to step off.
Let's go back, Brandon.
So Mayor, the question was any objection to staff bringing back at least 2 categories for defining data centers?
I object. 2 or more, or just 2?
At least 2.
At least 2, okay. Is there further objection? Seeing none.
I object as well.
Oh, Councilmember Hancock.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I object as well.
Okay, further objection? Then we'll move forward with 2 or more.
I object.
Okay. Yeah, Councilmember Andrews, okay.
How many is that, 4?
3.
3.
Okay.
Anybody else? Hearing none?
Can I ask a question what we're talking about?
Councilmember Bergen.
Okay, so.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, so just, we are saying we don't want to have different categories at all, 0? So we'll just, it basically, we're saying all data centers will be considered the same. Is that what we're saying?
If you vote no, yes. So what we're asking for is, do you want to sort of look at, again, to speak to the issue that was talked about, which is, from a intensity use, is a 10 megawatt data center the same thing as a 150 megawatt data center?
Okay, I guess, which begs the question, are we trying, if we say yes, are we setting different setback buffer standards for each of those categories? Or are we going to just have one buffer no matter what kind of data center?
With different categories, we will try and treat them within the context of that. So I think there could, yes, staff would probably recommend.
I guess I object then, I guess.
You object? Yes. Okay, Councilmember Bergen, you still object? Okay, and Councilmember Lawson objects? Okay. Okay.
So Mayor,
It's your vote or your direction.
No, I fail to see, why we wouldn't want differences given the different size. And I think kind of one of the metrics that really defines differences in data centers is the usage, the megawatt usage. And so, and I think that's probably going to equate to the size of the data center. So I failed to see why we wouldn't want different standards for different sizes of a data center.
Okay. Mayor.
Yeah.
So sorry, Councilman Bergen.
I think for me, if residents are concerned about data centers, it seems like we would just look at what is a reasonable, safe buffer for any data center. Don't they basically, are you saying one will have a more negative impact? Which is, we don't know if that's even proven. I guess I was just like, let's make it simple.
Well, in terms of size, in physical size, I think the megawatt usage would have some corollary to the physical size of the data center.
Let me make if I can, Mayor, I'll make a suggestion with that. Why don't we do a hybrid? Why don't we have a certain square footage and megawatts and figure out what that looks like, right? So we cover both, because that's what I see like we're going back and forth on. Jason's staring at me like he doesn't like that.
Mayor, so just if I can clarify, so the question isn't what are the definitions that staff will
Whether we
bring
should
back?
have one.
It's just, should they bring back more than one, right? They could bring back square footage, power usage, they can bring back anything anyone contacts them and says, hey, I want to know about this. The question is just, do we want more than one category defined in our code, or do we want to treat them all exactly the same?
Right, to look at.
And for the purposes of study session, you guys can still, if you allow staff to come back and put those ideas in front of you, you can still reject them later. But if you end it now, which it doesn't sound like it's split with the mayor saying, well, no, we're going to continue the idea. Again, we just want to know how much information you guys want us to bring back to you for consideration. And I would encourage that you allow staff to continue working on those things, and then when we get to that point, make the policy decision.
Okay. Next issue.
Okay, so then I think the other one too is obviously we've heard you all loud and clear on the buffers. You want to see those much lower again. Again, the information's been provided, so we will come back. We will start at something much lower and show you all the options around that. So then when we talk about buffers, buffers were explicit in the resolution. So we'll come back with a discussion on buffers. But I guess we'll start there. Is there anything else on that one, on buffers, other than you want to see the smaller level? Okay, so then I'm going to have Brandon walk you through kind of some of the other things that we've seen out there. So screening, some other things like that.
So just talking about tools, I mean, that's what we're trying to introduce is tools and have you all help us calibrate what those tools, if they're to be used, how should we calibrate them? So talking about, the size of the lots, typically the way our zoning code is set up, we don't get into requiring certain size lots or floor area ratios and things of that sort. We're mostly relying on what we would say is building setbacks. So if you're wanting buildings to be far away from property lines, we would talk about building setbacks. And so typically when we're thinking about those things right now, we're talking on a chord of 25 feet, 30 feet. Those are kind of the dimensions that are out there, but certainly along certain arterials, along interstates, it's 100 feet. So it can be a tool that can be used so if that's chosen to address issues. And again, that's how far back from the building should be from its property line. As it relates to some of the other distance parameters that we did talk about, I mean, those are tools that are in our code in varying degrees. For example, you have separation requirements of liquor stores. That is a distance between liquor stores that is out there. There is requirements that talk about if you are a bar and you're within 300 feet of a residential use, then you need a conditional use. So those are tools that are out there that, if you think some of those tools might be helpful to calibrate things a little more fine-grained, those are things that we can do. And then I think the other one I might want to get to is sound a little bit. So certainly we've talked about screening from a visual component, and usually we're not thinking too much about sound with that sort of screening. But I think we're hearing more concern about sound with data centers, and so certainly focusing more on that, focusing on what the nature of the wall or the screen is to produce more sound quality than a pine fence or things of that sort. So those are other tools we could look at in terms of the height of that, what makes sense in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the height of generators and chillers and all that stuff. So those are things that are not off the shelf or written in our code at this point in time. So those could be things that you look at on a site that helps you maybe package some mitigations together that feel like the right calibration.
Councilmember Gardner? Okay, Councilmember Bergen, then Councilmember Gardner.
Yes. Why would we do this? If we're going to set setbacks, shouldn't that happen first? Because why would you build a wall in the middle of nowhere if it's far away with a setback in an industrial zoned area? Like, you would just have a wall to nothing? Like, I think this needs to wait until we identify the setback buffer.
Councilmember Gardner?
Yeah, I guess I have a similar question, and I'm taking the 45 decibel level, for example, in residential areas. 45 decibels is a running air conditioning, generates above 45 decibels. And so what I'm getting at is these we already have maximum permissible sound levels are in many cases lower than what ambient noise is when you factor in trash trucks and semi trucks and go through the list of various other uses that might happen. And so I don't understand, if we're already going to put a buffer in place, why we would need additional noise restrictions. That's the purpose of a buffer, is to address those noise concerns. And again, 45 decibels, for example, in a residential neighborhood, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., a running air conditioning exceeds 45 decibels. So we already have such low decibel maximums that if you add a buffer on top of that, I don't see the need for additional noise mitigation.
Mayor?
Unless you just want to make it more expensive, which I'm guessing is the case.
Let's see, Councilmember Bergen, did we get you? And then, okay, Councilmember Horton.
Yes. Thanks, Mayor. Question around noise. I'm thinking about it from an ecological standpoint, right? Yeah, we could, have a data center built, not have a wall, but the frequency of noise changes per living creatures. And to be responsible of the environment of our city, I think this would make sense to do our due diligence. Yeah, it may be costly, and at the same time, and make sure we're doing our jobs well, is my perspective.
Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, regarding that, has there been any talk about the centers to kind of mitigate some of that, which is to build them underground?
I don't know if it's underground. I will tell you that as has been
noise help.
Yeah, as I will tell you, as has been noted, the noise standards those are good noise standards that exist in our code. For the larger data centers that have been built, they, as a matter of course, have used large-scale screening walls as part of their site development. So they're using screening walls on their site. Best practice is that you put those walls as close to whether it's the chillers, whether it's the generators, they're typically putting them as close to as sort of practical to help mitigate that noise there. So we're seeing the walls, that's how we're seeing it. There's not been discussions around other items, although I think, as Brandon noted, it does allow for chillers to be roof mounted. I think mostly we're seeing our chillers ground mounted is what we've typically seen from those folks, again, just because it's lower on the ground. That helps with the noise levels and make sure that they're complying with noise standards.
Yeah. I just want to say, I don't think I'm not a big fan of the walls. What I would rather see is a greater setback for purposes of some water-wise landscaping, because I think these, quite frankly, these things visually don't look that well. I think some of the newer ones look better, but they are massive, and I think that some landscaping would break it up more than a wall. I think it looked more like a correctional facility with a big wall. Further questions or comments? Okay.
The one you touched on it, so I will touch on landscaping. We're not going to touch on landscaping here, and staff's request.
Water-wise landscaping.
Yeah. One of the requests would be, given that you all have given us direction to look at our landscaping standards in general around the industrial areas, we're going to bring that forward as part of that. So sort of we're looking at the landscaping standards uniformly across all of our industrial areas per the direction from council.
Good. Okay. Further questions or comments on this section? Councilmember Weil.
I just want to make sure, so the noise that we're talking about, it's just straight noise. It is not including the low frequency noise. We're just looking at what is.
I'll look at Josh.
Okay, just-
Josh took off
just
on me.
wanted
So
to
yeah.
clarify.
So yeah. So that's that. Yes, that is typically from. Those pieces. That's where we're measuring, and that's what we're able to measure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So this is kind of those questions. So I think we've gotten we got guidance on setbacks. I think you guys gave us guidance on the noise regulations. I've not heard a request for the screenings, and then the other areas I think you all are.
I think the screening is, from my standpoint, it's the whatever the landscape plan is screening, but not so. But you said you're going to raise that anyway, so right. Councilmember Bergen.
What kind of landscape screening? You know, we're into water-wise landscape.
Water-wise.
Okay, 'cause
Approved by
no-
Marshall Brown.
Okay.
That's what we're looking at here. Okay, yes.
Well, when we talk about screening, the generators and the chillers, those are kind of utility features that are on the ground. And so we would treat them like any other sort of utility feature and put up a screen proximate to them themselves. I'm not talking per se of a wall around the property or something of that sort. So those generators, I think we're seeing roughly 15 to 20 feet tall in terms of the generator facility. And so that is kind of a newer, a taller screen than we've seen in the past. And frankly, the screen walls that we're seeing by QTS, have some insulative quality that we don't typically see. And we thought, well, that seems like a good idea. And so I think that's why we brought this to y'all, as just trying to respond to the resolution, which I felt, asked us to bring forward some ideas for you all to consider. And so I think that's where we're at right now.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
So there just is the other question. And so I do have a question for Marshall from Aurora Water. With respect to any discharge of water, so we know, for example, we talked about the kind of salt slug into our wastewater system that comes from Niagara. What are the standards around treating any flushing water or things of that nature to make sure that our wastewater, which will be reuse water, is not being contaminated in a way that either A, prevents it from being used for reuse or significantly increases our costs?
Yeah, so great question. Couple of things there. The good news is the biggest complication with the cooling systems is the TDS concentration from evaporative cooling. So with the evaporative cooling ordinance, we're eliminating that.
Could you explain what that is? I'm sorry.
Okay,
The
so,
acronym.
yeah, as evaporative coolers get used, the water goes through the cooler or the chillers, et cetera, the evaporative mats multiple times, and it concentrates salt, which is TDS, total dissolved solids. So the concentration of the salts then get discharged to the sewer system, and the bugs at the sewer treatment facility hate salt. Salt kills them, too much salt, so complicates all that. So by avoiding evaporative cooling, we avoid the salt or total dissolved solid issue. So we don't have any of that kind of discharge. What we do have with the closed loop systems are they take a little bit of water, much smaller volumes of water, obviously, and they fill a system and they add some chemicals to the water. And I think that's probably what your question is about. So those discharges are controlled by industrial discharge permits in partnership with Metro Wastewater. So the good news is the chemical concentrations are pretty low and the volumes of the discharge are pretty low. So we have not seen challenges with the industrial discharges.
So that's monitored by Metro and by the state through that industrial discharge permit system. Like they have regular monitoring that they're completing in accordance with the kind of Clean Water Act and other state patchwork of non-city legislation that goes into that.
Yeah, primarily Metro Water Recovery in partnership with the city. We do monitoring primarily through Metro, but the city does a little bit too, to ensure that the water quality reaching the treatment plant is not a problem. And then we identify industrial dischargers that could need to be monitored a little more. Yes, that's how all that's tracked.
Further questions or comments? Are there other areas? We've talked about everything else. Seeing none, and thanks for your work, and we look forward to you come back to another study session with some of the answers to this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Final, just so you guys know, in terms of the other two items we didn't touch on, In 3 weeks, we'll take forward the evaporative cooling directly to council. That can go there. The UDO update that we discussed on the MUOI will go to the Planning Commission in September. And then I think either at the last meeting in September or first meeting in October, it'll be to you all. So it'll be a little bit further out because it's a UDO update, so it has to go to the Planning Commission. So,
very well.
But the evaporative can come straight to council.
Okay. Great, thanks. Well, we will reconvene at 4:55 PM in the executive session.